There we go. Yep. Let's move along. We are on page, I guess, 144. I'll put it down here. Good morning, everybody. Having a good weekend. It's chilly here out on the East Coast. We got a big winter storm coming in. Good morning. Yeah, so working from Terryl Whitlatch's Science of Creature Design. I've got about, I think, 2-ish weeks left in here. Been thinking about what's next. And trying to keep up with this. Interesting, I saw I think I posted this in one of my Instagram stories recently, but there was a paleo artist commenting on one of the problems you run into with AI is the complete lack of accuracy, because it doesn't know what it's looking at. And often I'll hear artists talk about, the ones that are kind of in the middle. They like it for reference, they'll say, or inspiration. But the problem again you run into is it's not. Like it looks like what you might think of as being inspiration, but or even reference, but it's just not. It doesn't reflect anything real. And a lot of times when you're working, even from your imagination, like you need actual information to fuel your imagination with. Otherwise, you're just throwing random stuff down, and but that's just not accurate, because you need to understand how things work if you're trying to make some kind of a world or situation that can engage your viewers. Otherwise you're just kind of just making random stuff. So I always like to refer to it as anti-reality, because it's against dealing with the reality of the world around it, because it doesn't actually think, it doesn't actually have a real thought, it's not designing, it's not making. It's just generating. It's taking random bits of information and smashing them together in a way that kind of simulates the appearance of thought. And one of the major issues I take with it is it's just philosophically bankrupt. Like it doesn't have a purpose. Yeah, but I'll talk to people like, well, I like it for this or for that, and it just doesn't make any sense to me that they would use it for. Yeah, it's not to say you couldn't draw from it. That's it's not the same thing as saying it's worth referencing. But never stand between what someone wants versus what they think that, where they say the effect that they want is. It's kind of revealed a lot of people to me in terms of their lack of creativity and interest in their own experience and confidence in their own imagination. Because I don't like to think of people as not having that ability to come up with their own thoughts, but there's apparently a lot of people that do. A lot of people that don't want to engage with themselves. Alright, we got a Styracosaurus here. And so this is the muscular version. The flayed, the écorché skeleton up there. I saw yesterday Sam Does Art put out a video about it as well. Kind of how it's tanked certain reference sites that people have relied on for a while, like Pinterest, for inspiration, and it's kind of made a lot of them unusable beyond maybe things you've already saved in the past. Good morning, Brazil. So, but he was just pointing out that you can't rely on it anymore because of the flood of nonsense on there, and you can't get rid of it. I was trying to search even for something on ArtStation recently, and see if any artists were doing a certain thing that I could share with my university students. And you kind of have to go in and press that don't AI thing, because otherwise you just get this flood of stuff. And I was looking for like real artists doing real things, and all I got was just dozens and dozens of these things by some person that was making fake work. Not a Triceratops. We got ourselves a Styracosaurus. Close though. So yesterday we were doing the Protoceratops. Yeah, it's a big problem. You know, the thing is, like, there's a lot of artists I follow on there, and um, you have to kind of be, careful. But it's true of anywhere you look these days. I mean, we saw what Meta tried to pull. They even bragged about it. Like, they were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make a bunch of fake AI profiles," and they also went like full HR intersectional with them, where like one of them, she like checked off like 3 out of the 4 boxes for like an HR department, and then it said they're like, she was the realest of the real or something like that, and they all got kind of laughed off the internet. Meta went through and like deleted all of them really fast just because it was so egregiously stupid. But I don't know why they would want AI at all on their platforms, because they rely on advertising, and the advertising has to go to real people. Well, right now, I am using Terryl Whitlatch's Science of Creature Design, which did I put that in the comment? Looks like I didn't. There we go. Put that in my, pin that to the bottom. And she isn't, dinosaurs aren't the only thing that's in here. And this book is more about her kind of going through and showing like real anatomy and then applying it to creature design. And she's been around a long time doing creature design stuff. But so so that's definitely a good one. I'm not sure what newer resources. I'm sure there's like a lot of really good books that include like all the latest whatever stuff for dinosaurs. So that's what I've been using for the last little bit. But I've been going through this book since the beginning of September, I think. Because part of what I'm doing here with these morning studies, it's not the only thing I've been doing and the only thing I will do, but what I wanted to do was kind of take advantage of these books that I have and spend at least some time with them every morning. So yeah, that's what I can recommend this one. I don't have any other real kind of dinosaur focused books though, personally. Um, this one isn't actually dinosaur focused. It's just part of what's going on in here. But yeah, I've been kind of started this project where I've been going through and doing copy stuff of different art books that I own, kind of reading what the artist has to say, or the comments that are there, or looking at what the artist is paying attention to. And some of these have been like classic tomes, like I've gone through some of the Loomis stuff, Bridgman, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what we see going on here. But But as far as like other books for dinosaurs, I don't really know exactly. I would expect, Terryl here to be kind of up on the latest stuff. She's actually, her background originally was biology of some kind. I forget, paleobiology possibly, or regular. And then she kind of fell into, or directed into, creature design around the time Star Wars prequels got going. And her most famous design is probably, is an infamous character. So she designed Jar Jar Binks in the prequel movies. But I don't know that she designed his like character, as in like the kind of character he was, but just what he looked like. So that's probably what she's most famous for, but she's worked on everything, especially if it requires any kind of like realistic design. So maybe like the Avatar type movies, which I've only ever seen the first one. I have no interest in. The only reason I saw that one is because I went to see it in IMAX, and that was like what? Oops, a little too much ink there. That was back in, when did that come out? 2010? 2009, whatever the original first one came out. But that's her probably her most famous one. But I mean, that was a long time ago. But you open up the old Art of Star Wars prequel books, and you'll see a ton of her stuff in there. Ian McKaig's in there, and of course Doug Chang, who's still with Lucasfilm. Dermot Power's in there. A lot of really great artists. Ryan Church, Eric Tiemens, both of which I think they're both still with Lucasfilm. I know Church is. It's interesting to see kind of how these people that followed up the original films have had, what influence they've had on the visual direction Star Wars has gone in. I'm not a big fan of really anything they've done recently. I've heard good things about some of the recent shows, like this Skeleton Cruise show. Apparently people are liking that one. I wasn't that impressed by the commercials I saw, so I haven't thought about it. And then there's Andor, people like that one. I like Rogue One. I have mixed feelings about it because there's a lot of kind of weird background stuff with it, like that's outside the film, like firing the director and bringing another director to reshoot it, and a bunch of other things. And then like you watch the original advertisement for Rogue One, and nothing that's in that ad is in the movie. Like none of the shots are. Like there's a big shot of the girl running across some water, the beach there in the movie, and she's holding the disc drive, but she never does that in the movie. Like she's it just doesn't happen. Or famously, there's like a shot of a TIE fighter coming up right in front of her face, in front of the tower, and that also doesn't happen in the movie. She goes out to that tower, but that scene itself doesn't happen, or her wearing a stormtrooper pilot outfit. I've heard them kind of make an excuse for that, because the advertisements like show nothing that's in the actual show, which is weird. And they say they had to do with like it's like a bunch of random stuff that they shot, but it doesn't make any sense because they also went through and rendered out all the CG and everything that's in there, and the special effects. And if she's running across the field or across the water, they have to put in all the the big heavy duty machinery that's chasing her down the water, those AT-ATs. So, but I always thought that was kind of interesting. That I think it's okay. There's a lot of things I don't like about it. One of the things I don't like is just kind of how small Disney's made Star Wars, where it's like it revolves around a small number of people. I guess with some of the Mandalorian, that was pretty good too. Well, I'm trying to remember things. Have the art outbook for the first season of Mandalorian around here somewhere. So, yeah, but this has been interesting to see kind of the visual direction. And Doug Chang, I saw some of his. I went to a couple of his lectures, presentations um, at Lightbox, and he made a few comments that I thought were interesting. One was the kind of the design philosophy behind Star Wars. One of which was is to make things so simple that anyone, including a small child, could draw. So basically, if you think about the shape of a TIE fighter, it's a ball with a couple of rectangles or octagons or hexagons, whatever they are. I think octagons. And that's really easy for just about anyone to draw. And so the site is just like make it easy enough for like a 5-year-old to draw. Or you look at the Millennium Falcon. It's basically a circle with some triangles coming off the front, and then a little egg on the side. And you'll see that with a lot of the Star Wars ships, especially the original trilogy ships, is like they're really, really easy to kind of just draw out of your head. Which I think is really, it's a very smart way of thinking about the style. I don't know that they've always maintained that. Not everything works that way. The Death Stars, it's a good example of how it working really well. It's a big ball, right, with a little circle on it and a line through the middle. Like it's that kind of iconic approach, and it's made it very approachable to everybody. Something I should maybe think about incorporating more into the things that I do. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, even with that first one, like, they had to, right? They didn't have a big budget. And Lucas took a lower payout in exchange for the licensing rights. And so I think part of what he was definitely planning for was, a shift in the market where people were really interested in the merchandise of the films, which was new at the time. That wasn't a major thing back then, where like you planned on merchandising, making toys and action figures and books and all these other things for a film. It just wasn't something you did. They weren't planning on that when they made A Space Odyssey, right? I think it's one thing that's made Star Wars such an influential design too, because it kind of blends the that simplicity, but then it has like a depth of texture, and that's the other thing he said. So he said, there's that simple design effect that it has, but it should also have like this cool factor, like that kids can play with it, and especially little boys can be fascinated by it because you can see all the mechanics and how they work, and everything kind of has like an analog to functionality. so that people kind of understand what's going on. And so I think that's definitely a kind of important factor too. Which one of the reasons why it's like tradition, historically it was definitely a boys' brand, and the girls that I knew that liked it, they liked it for those kinds of reasons, that it had like these deeper connections and things like that. And you've seen kind of a dumbing down. Yeah, I think the from what I understand, like the first one was made on somewhat of a budget, if I recall correctly, which I think also drove a lot of the kit bashing aesthetic in it, because they were buying up toys and gluing stuff up together rather than making original things to a certain degree. If that's the story I recall anyway. I don't know. Maybe it's been updated since I've last looked at that. But yeah, maybe someone's explained something else recently that I wasn't aware of. Maybe it's just he took a lower pay or something like that in exchange for the merchandising rights. Like, because I know there was something in there where he had made a special deal, which is one of the reasons that made him so wealthy, was the that merchandising part of it. So they make fun of in Spaceballs, of course. There's the Emperor shows up and he's just talking about merchandising. But those two things. So making it super simple, that even a child can draw the shapes, draw the tech and things like that. But then also kind of giving it that texture of a real kind of lived-in world that makes it a place you want to go. That you would be fascinated to go to. The other thing he said, which I thought was kind of interesting, let's see, this is page 144. We're going to move on to the next one so I can draw the skinned over edition. We've got half an hour left. Page 144. But the other thing he said that was interesting was that they try to, I don't know what the word would be, like piggyback on. By the way, here's the page I'm working from here. So these are the kinds of drawings you'll see in her book. She has 3 books. This is one of them. So here's the cover for this one: Science of Creature Design. And so it's all about kind of applied animal anatomy. Though some of the things she kind of thinks are really important, I thought are kind of interesting in terms of like landmarks and anatomical landmarks and things like that she mentions kind of very directly in here, which aren't necessarily things that I would always value. Well, maybe. I mean, definitely, it's easy for people to get caught up in detail when using a pencil. And, of course, the fact that you can erase. It's one of the problems you have with digital work. One of the things I'm kind of thinking about doing, and I've kind of gotten mixed feedback on my university, is I've primarily been teaching this concept drawing class, which I've never been at a university where I teach the same thing semester after semester. It's kind of driving me a little bit crazy. I might start pushing to teach some newer things, but someone popped over on Twitch. Triceraxotl? That's funny. No, it's a Styracosaurus. Sorry, I didn't see your comment up there earlier. But I've been thinking, because I've been advocating for some changes in the department here, which is kind of a weird thing to do. I've only been here like a year and a half, and I'm already like, hey, what if we... Because they were talking about doing a illustration or track within the program. And it's a communication arts program, which is I think it was originally supposed to have been a... let me back up there. There we go. It was supposed to have been an illustration program, but they named it communication arts for some, I think, stupid reason. But I wasn't here to make that decision, so they didn't ask me. But I've been thinking about if we can move. I'd like to. Right now, the class is a junior level class. It's for third year college students, and they. I've been saying, they kind of asked my thoughts on like what would an illustration track look like. I said, well, here's what I would recommend. I sent in this big long thing that I spent a day on, trying to say, okay, this is what I think should be in the program. And I've gotten some pushback on some of the things because I think there's people that don't understand. For some reason, there's people I think would understand the importance of kind of focusing and specializing on certain things, but apparently I was incorrect in that assumption. But I've been thinking, if we could move this concept drawing class to a sophomore level class, back when they're taking their initial figure drawing classes, I think would make a big positive difference for students. But what I've been saying is that this is a long way of saying, I've been saying, well, what if we shifted, because most students are doing digital work in the concept drawing class, and I'm able to use whatever platform and programs they want to use. I've been thinking, well, what if we put in the sophomore year and we made it an all traditional media class, and so we use things like markers and colored pencils and different techniques you'll see traditional media concept artists use, because I think there's a lot to be said for diving into ink and watercolor and other kind of indelible materials for training artists, rather than dealing with erasable material, which is one of the problems with pencils, like regular pencils, is they tend to be very erasable. What do you mean, such as like the pushback or the? But that was my larger, long-winded point. Was just saying, what if we made it all traditional media? That would at least be interesting. Oh, so one of the things I was saying is what should be in the problem that the major kind of ran into is when they got started, there was some pushback to its creation by other majors. This is a long time ago, like 20 years ago, like before I was here. And anyway, so as part of that pushback, the response from the department chair at the time was to try to be the everything major. And so the major is kind of a hodgepodge of mostly illustration, visual effects, some game design, some graphic design, and there's 3 graphic design program classes that are required in the major, which I think is just weird. Because there's a whole graphic design major on campus, and so if they're not interested in being focused on graphic design, that's their problem over there. Why should we deal with that? But pushback I got back was especially for a course on, well, there's a couple different things. One was, I think there should be two different, like, traditional media illustration courses. And apparently there was a push a long time ago to make the whole program 100% digital, which I think was just be silly. Like, that's just not that interesting. But one of the illustration courses I was saying they should have is a visual metaphor illustration class, or what they would typically call editorial illustration. And basically, it's the kind of illustration class where it's less about storytelling, and it's more about conveying meaning through symbols and juxtaposition and all these other things that are kind of vital for creating meaning beyond story in an illustration. So like historically, illustrators like, say, C.F. Payne or Brad Holland would be kind of your more popular illustrators working in that style. It's the kind of things where you'd see an article next to an illustration next to an article in a magazine where it has some kind of symbolic language going on in it. Anita Kuntz is another classic example. There's a lot of them. It's like a really, really important kind of illustration. And I was trying to explain this to the department. So like, it's better to have this class than it is to have, say, a typography class. And so where the pushback, I think, comes from is the fact that only a certain number of the professors have actually a background in illustration. Like our department head right now, which is where I got some of that from, is his background is actually in animation and game design. Like his education was animation. I taught at the school that he went to, not when he was there, but because he graduated around the same time I did. But I taught at that school, and he's in the animation major, and they're focused almost exclusively in the animation program on storytelling, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it kind of limits your view as to what's important to illustration. And so, like, I think that's a really important class to have because it's how you develop meaning. So that was one area of pushback that I saw. The other thing I'm trying to do is say, hey, because I had this wonderful experience doing this at that last school I was at Ringling, where basically every section of a course, so no matter who's, like, maybe if you're all taking well, I think it's not so much that. I think what it is the person that I'm talking about here, like, they claim to be data focused, like they need rationales from different sources. And for me, it's like, well, you look at the illustration market, and like you open up the the awards books for illustration, and it's like it's obviously there, like it's obviously important. Or you go look at illustration majors, and you'll see, oh yeah, that's definitely a big part of the program is developing those kinds of thinking skills. Because storytelling isn't the only thing you want to convey in an image. It can be, it's definitely important, but it's not the only thing you can do, obviously. But apparently this was lost on him. So that was a big one. But one of the things I've been trying to get done, and there's been a lot of pushback on it too, is standardizing content of some of the courses. It doesn't have to necessarily be all of them, but I think it should definitely be in the first year. Or I don't know if that's true, because right now the major is the biggest major of the art programs. Like, the major is so large that at most schools it should be its own program separate from the rest of the art majors, and then be broken up into multiple majors within itself. Like, it should be its own department, not just a major. So there's 600 students in this communication arts major, And the other majors that are art related on campus are just kind of evaporating, like especially the fine art ones. And we have students like transferring into this one, like dozens of them every semester. So money isn't an issue for this department. I think what it is students, see this as like a more viable path toward living an artistic life, that they can invest in, because we present hard skills. There's some other things going on that I don't like, but generally speaking, like it presents hard skills that students can understand, that get them closer to their goals. And so we are looking at creating tracks within the major to help students focus their approaches more directly. And the communication arts originally was just a way. It's actually was supposed to be illustration. It's supposed to be the major, and really it should be broken up into like 4 or 5 different majors. There should be illustration. There should be animation. There should be game design. There should be visual effects. It's like any of those kind of commercial art narrative programs, but but they named it communication arts as a way of kind of making it sound more artsy, I guess, more academically acceptable, which I think is a silly thing to do. Just make it what it is. Like, it's okay, engineering is engineering, illustration is illustration, printmaking is printmaking. Like, let it be the thing that it is. But they didn't ask me, obviously, because I wasn't here. I would have told them that that's a mistake. Should name it illustration and be focused on that. But so but the other area again is basically the standardization of content. And so I'm trying to conduct an experiment with my course that I teach, and I put together a pretty thorough online resource rather. Can be used as an online course too, but it's an online resource of materials that we can then hand out to everybody teaching the class, teaching that course, rather, even if they're not, teaching my direct students, that way everyone's kind of teaching the same thing, and standardizing that means there's other things you can do with it. But I think it's something that definitely should happen with what we consider to be the more foundational based classes. And I think there's game design is definitely one big area that they definitely need. I think the initial plan is to do 2 tracks within the major. So one would be kind of the more illustration side, which is what I recommend. The other would be the more tech-focused side, which would be visual effects and game design. Initially when I put the idea forward, the incoming department chair, he was like, yeah, this is really exciting. Let's do this. Let's start pushing this out. And then I think he's been getting some pushback from some old timers that are here, where they're like, well, it takes up resources and we don't have those. And I'm like, well, not really. It's just it's really a shuffling and a relabeling and focusing of certain courses. And even if the students are already in the major and they have a track, we can just offer certain things as substitutions, and I think most of the students would actually prefer these substitutions over what we have now. So like when I was graduating as a student, I went to an illustration major, sounding similar to what you're doing, and while I was there, during my senior year, I think is when they really got it going. It was kind of halfway started before then, but by my senior year, they had a full-fledged animation program at the university, and it's one wins all kinds of awards, and they do really well for their students. But it wasn't something I had, say, the opportunity to look at. And again, when I was graduating, though, this is 2004, so 20 years ago now, which is kind of crazy to think about. was you could get a job in game design as a concept artist or a 3D modeler or whatever if you had like some good figure drawings. Like, it didn't take a lot to get in because they just needed people that could draw or understand things visually, and so but it's definitely a different world now where like if you want to do game art, like they expect you to understand everything. Back then they were willing to teach because there just wasn't anybody that could do these jobs. And so when I graduated, I had like a couple different offers from a couple different places. And I went, at the time I went with one that because I'd kind of gotten into fine art painting at the time, and which I'd like to get back to. Just been working on these other projects lately. But those are kind of the two areas where I saw this pushback. Is like, well, one is the standardization, because a lot of the professors, they're used to working in a system where they just do what they want. And I think that can be good for certain things, but I don't believe that it really serves the students' interests all that well a lot of the time. It kind of gets in the way. So let's get the little baby on here so we can do this page too. Because there are certain things I think that are standard, and there's general practices that are worth learning, and a lot of times, the professors get fixated. So I've heard them talk about this. Yeah, I'm really interested in helping them develop like their own voice, and I'm like, well, they don't have any life experience yet. How could they have a voice? They're 20 years old. What do they know? So yeah, so that's kind of the two things that I would like to see is like this illustration major kind of refocused into an actual illustration major rather than a hodgepodge of different things. The students walk away with, a variety of unfocused skills, and I think it's better for them to get like something that's more solid, more focused. And I think that will make a big difference for the students. But a lot of them, they're looking at me like I'm the new kid, which is funny for me in a certain way because I've taught at, this is university number 7 for me. And I've taught probably thousands of students if I had to go back and count them up. At these 7 universities across multiple majors. I was recently teaching drawing, but it was for motion designers at Ringling. And so that was really interesting because I'm not an animator or a motion designer at all, but they were having me there to kind of teach them figure drawing and perspective and composition and some other things. But being around that was really, really interesting for me. And then, so that was like where I was just before here. The thing I've taught the most over the years is figure drawing, which I'm not doing at all here. But those are kind of the two major areas of pushback that I've seen at the school. Totally missed that line. Need to move it over. But yeah, but I'd like to see this concept drawing class move to all traditional media, and then have like a sequence of follow up classes where we do digital painting, and we include some of the things they already have right now, which are like a ZBrush class, um, which I think is all really good stuff, and then have like a follow up to that where it's like you're doing uh, intensive digital painting, using kind of standardized techniques, straight direct painting, maybe the use of some photo textures in a project. So you kind of get a broad picture and develop some of these kind of standard skills. It's kind of hard to do right now with the way that the program is structured. And then have like a follow-up to that where you're doing maybe like a Blender class for concept as opposed to, media oriented, like finished media. It's more of a concept type class. And then having a follow-up to that, which is where you kind of mix it all together, and it's more of a portfolio class. So that's what I'm kind of thinking for the illustration track. But a lot of the professors that are here, they've been here a long time at this school. Some of them, this is the only school they've ever taught at, unless they've taught privately or something on their own. So I'm coming in here with like a bunch of weird or outside perspectives. So, not looking to step on too many toes, but if like there's an opportunity to drive a certain kind of change, I definitely want to do that where I feel like I have something to add to that conversation. But yeah, that's kind of where I've got that pushback. Is mostly those two things, and I know where it's coming from, but if we could kind of push those two things in, I think it would make a huge difference for the students. And if they don't want to do my track, I'll do it myself. I've got my my teaching site, my art professor, and I've taught most of the things I put in that major list, and so takes time, but I could definitely build it all there. Because I feel like I could do that. Between the kind of professional experience I've had and the academic experience, working with real students in the classroom. Well, it depends on what you're teaching. If you're teaching in primary or secondary school, so high school, middle school, elementary school, you do need a special degree that is teaching. You need an art education degree because it comes with a bunch of certifications. It's kind of a weird major because you you don't actually take that many art classes. You take a lot of kind of classroom management and lesson making classes. To teach at a university, if you want to teach full time, most schools will require a master's degree in some kind of art for the most part. There's some exceptions. I think SCAD doesn't require one. I know Ringling didn't require one. It helps, I think, at some of these schools, but it's not required. So, like, kind of at these art and design colleges, you don't need them as much. I think maybe at the current school I'm at, I could have gotten away with not having one, but I'm not sure. I have one, so I have a master's degree in painting from New York Academy of Art, which I'm finally no longer indebted to for that experience. It was good for me, but yes. But if you want to teach at the university, you do for the most part you do at most schools. And there's some exceptions like art and design colleges. In some majors, they'll have like a professional exception. So if you have like significant professional experience, like 5 to 10 years of kind of demonstrated experience, and maybe high level accomplishments within that area, like major publications and things like that, they'll overlook the degree. In my mind, that's just kind of like that should just be a given. Like, I don't think the degree should be more valuable than that, but that's just the way the schools work. Yeah, so generally speaking, like even for a lot of adjunct or part-time teaching, so if you want to like teach a single class or something like that, where you're not a full-time employee, a lot of schools require the master's degree now, which I think is kind of crazy because those adjunct classes don't pay all that well. Let's see. So having the master's degree has helped me get positions, but also put me in a lot of debt for a long time. But it was the only school I wanted to go to, and I actually wasn't even thinking full-time teaching when I went there. It was just like people I wanted to learn from were all teaching there. Yeah, well, yeah, that's definitely me to a certain degree, right? Like, I love learning new things. Um, and definitely fall into that category a lot of times. I mean, look at what I'm doing right now, right? I'm drawing from a book because there's so many things to learn that are worth learning. Um, but yeah, you do need to like produce at some point. Um, that's whether it's working professionally or as an independent artist or working with galleries and things like that. Yeah, but artists do love to learn new things, generally speaking, from what I've seen. Um, Because you get excited when you learn a new thing, and then you get to apply it, and you see the effect that it has. But I think that's one of the mistakes that someone can fall into, and I think I've definitely fallen into it early on, and it's taken me some time to kind of recognize that because I just didn't understand the mistake. But basically, if you get focused exclusively or almost exclusively on skills development, it can feel very satisfying because you're learning new things, your skills are improving, you're making the things that look like the things you want to make to a certain degree. But the people that I've found who tend to be the most successful and well regarded in arts, they tend to be people who, rather than kind of getting on the skills grind, what they did is they had a thing they wanted to make, like a picture or a story or a product that they wanted to put out, and learning a skill was a means to getting to that project. And kind of as I've changed my approach to doing things that way, I think it's had a more meaningful impact on myself. But it wasn't a problem I was aware of when I was a student. It's not something people really tell you about, because you get a lot of positive feedback for improving your skills, right? So if you're in a class and you get better at figure drawing or painting or whatever, you're getting good grades, you're getting praise, you're getting all this good feedback, and that kind of justifies that approach, when in fact that approach is actually what's kind of getting in the way of you becoming an actual artist rather than just a technician. Because it is that kind of thing that's measurable, right? You can measure. Good morning. Over there on Kick. So yeah, again, like I've seen that kind of as an example of people I've met over the years, that the ones that take that approach, where like say they're trying to tell a story, so they want to make a comic book or a series of illustrations, and that project becomes the rationale for the skills that they're learning, rather than just learn to draw good. Like when I was a student, I just wanted to draw good. I wanted to be able to accurately draw and represent the things that I saw in front of me in an expressive way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of lacks the same level of meaning that having a project to do would be for that. So if there's something I wanted to say about something, or a story I wanted to tell that was very specific, that's where that comes in. And that's the other reason I want to kind of move this concept drawing class to the sophomore year, is most of the sophomore year is focused exclusively on skills development. And I think that's kind of a mistake. So like if you put the concept drawing class in there, that's a good spot because there's some storytelling in there, there's character design and drawing, and it kind of helps students see the reasons why they're doing all the figure drawing. Or they should take a landscape painting class, or understand human anatomy, or art perspective, and a bunch of other things that I think are really useful to students. And kind of being able to see kind of how that connects together in a somewhat narrative, contiguous whole within that course I think would make a big difference for their kind of rationale and their development. Yeah, and but I think that happens a lot because again, the skills, that's something that's measurable, right? So when I'm grading a project, I have to have, to a certain degree, things in the project and gradings and rubrics that that are objective. So when a student comes to me and says, "Why did I get this grade?" I can say, "Well, there's this, this, and this," rather than "I just didn't like it" or "I didn't think it was a good idea" or whatever. So I like, as much as I can, I like to put objective things into a project. One of the things that I grade really heavily, usually about a third of a project's weight, is just process. Like, did you? Because I kind of combine exploratory exercises, like in perspective, like we draw a bunch of boxes and then do things with those boxes, etc. And so, did the student do all of those activities? Is like often part of one of my grading rubrics. And so I found students that follow through on process tend to be more successful. But I think there's a lack of focus. I think that's one of the kind of the weaknesses of a lot of academic programs, is they don't put enough emphasis on that early on. And I think it's because there's this kind of this false idea that skills make the artist, and I think that's a half-truth. I think 3D has an important place in concept art and reference. I think the blockouts can be really, really helpful. I think that they can also be a crutch for not understanding how things work. And I get what they're for and how they work and all that, and I've used them. I think an over-reliance on them can also harm style, because a lot of what makes an image interesting is the mistakes that people make. So it's not just being accurate visually, because technically speaking, even perspective isn't accurate to how our eyes actually see. It's just it helps to a certain degree because it's rational and it makes sense. Especially if you learn actual technical perspective. Which, shameless plug, I have courses on that on my teaching site. But again, you have to recognize it's not how the eye actually sees and perceives the world, but it does make sense, right, to the eye. So, but I think 3D is really important. Even just like as a concepting tool within itself, like learning to sculpt and work in 3D, I think is really, really helpful, or model and texture and things like that. I've been putting some time into learning that here on my own. I've kind of done it sporadically over the years. Like I got pretty good at ZBrush stuff for a while. I haven't been using it as much in the last couple of years though. And then I've been emphasizing Blender and iPad stuff lately. Like I like Nomad Sculpt. There's a couple other iPad apps that I guess I should look at for 3D. But those are the ones that I've kind of spent the most time with. Hey, we've a little past an hour, so, but that's pretty good progress today. Finished off 2 pages. This is page 145 from the book, and today is the 5th. Let's see if there's any little tweaks I want to make here. Maybe thicken some of these strokes up. So, yeah, but I think 3D is okay. It can be limiting though. Like again, because it is technically lens-based accurate. That can get in the way of like style exploration to a certain degree. How are we doing, Bosch? Do you need help with your blanket? Why don't you come lay down? My dog is being indecisive all of a sudden. So anyway, I'm going to call it there. It's been about an hour, a little over an hour working on this. Appreciate everybody that came in. Hopefully I'll be able to come back on later. I'm working on kind of revamping a lot of my course stuff today in preparation for the semester starting in a week. And I want to try and get that all done. I'm having a hard time focusing on it just because it's a lot of changes I need to tweak and things I need to add in. And believe it or not, paperwork is not my favorite thing to do, and that's kind of what this is like to a certain degree. So, but again, thanks to everybody that came in, and we'll talk to you next time.